Hello and welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic, where today I'm going to take a look at the final stage of the Diabolical Sudoku that was published in the Daily Telegraph yesterday. It's Friday the 28th of September. And what I thought we might do something a little bit different today. So you can reach this point in the solve fairly straightforwardly. It's nothing more than just finding the obvious numbers and finding a couple of pairs along the way. I think this 1-8 pair you can see here in row 6 was helpful in getting a number or two. And that was probably the most sophisticated piece of logic up to this point. And then you reach this point, and it struck me that there are probably several different ways of making progress from here. Well, there are several different ways, and I thought it might be interesting to run through the versions or the options that I've found, because they all work, they all crack the puzzle open, and I suppose it gives us hope, because we only have to really become expert in one or two of these, and if we do, that may well get you to the answer in a lot of these very difficult puzzles. And we've covered all of these techniques that are going to be relevant before, so I'm going to look at the Sashimi Finned X-Wing, a straight Finned X-Wing, and also an empty rectangle. So let's look first at the Sashimi Finned X-Wing here, and you can see I'm going to add some highlighting to the video. Hopefully it'll then therefore become clear, but the cells I want to focus on are this one and this one, this one and this one, and you can see that there is a very useful pattern of 8s in these two rows, and one of the reasons that this pattern is so powerful is that the 8s are only appearing twice in each of these rows, and of course the 8s are matching up here in column 5, and that allows us to do some really nice logic when we think about how these 8s interact. And the important thing when you're looking at these advanced techniques is to understand the right question to ask yourself, because once you frame the question correctly, the answer almost becomes obvious. So let's look at this square, and let's ask ourselves, what is the effect of this square being an 8? And you can immediately see if this square is an 8, that's going to give us an answer. We're going to be able to eliminate the 8 here, that'll give us a 5 here, and eliminate an 8 here, and that'll give us a 1 here. So it's very powerful if this is an 8. If this is not an 8, what does that mean? Well, what that means is, because there's only one other position an 8 can go in row 8, and that's here, that therefore eliminates the possibility of there being an 8 in this cell, which was only one of two possibilities where an 8 could go in row 6. So there's going to have to also therefore be an 8 in this cell. And look at the effect of that. That would allow us to eliminate an 8 here and eliminate an 8 here. So either way round, of course, we get to eliminate the 8s, we get 2 more single digits, and the whole puzzle collapses. It becomes a very straightforward solve. Now, why is this called a Sashimi Finned X-Wing? Well, it's because this cell here would be the natural candidate, or the natural normal X-Wing cell. You can see we've got this, 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 and this would be the sort of fourth corner of the rectangle. But this square here is already filled, and it definitely can't take an 8. And therefore it's only the fins that we're interested in. And that's why we use the sort of name sashimi here. We're saying that the sashimi means this is not possible to be an 8, and therefore we're only looking at the so-called fins of the fish, which are these two cells in this particular example. And this one obviously can't be because it's already containing 4. So we're just looking at the fins here. We're asking ourselves the normal X-Wing questions, and we're getting to a solution. Now, how else could we have got to a similar answer? Well, one of the things we could have thought about is an empty rectangle. Now, we have covered this in an earlier video, but let's start with, what is an empty rectangle? Well, an empty rectangle is a rectangular arrangement, or it can also be a broken arrangement within a 3x3 block where a number cannot go. So another way of stating this would be if a particular number can only go in one row and one column of a 3 by 3 block, then it is possible to identify an empty rectangle. So again, let's look at how 8s interact on this 3 by 3 block in the middle here. You can see that 8s can only go along the cells in row 4 and only go along the cells in row 5. So one row, one column. Therefore this cell, this cell, this cell and this cell form what's called the empty rectangle, because none of them can contain an 8. Now this is quite an interesting pattern, of course, but we have to understand how to use it. And the critical thing that you need to think about when we find these empty rectangles, or you have to appreciate, is because the number can only go in one row and one column, we only have to worry, we have to think about, okay, well, what happens if there is an 8 along here? And what happens if there is an 8 down here? Because one of those must be true, unless it's in this cell, in which case it's both true. But that one of those situations must exist. Now, when you find an empty rectangle, what you're also therefore looking to do is to find what's called a conjugate pair. And this will be another row or column in the grid that contains the number you're interested in this case an 8, in only one of two positions. Now, the interesting thing about this empty rectangle in this example is that there's actually two conjugate pairs, because if we go down to row 8 here, you can see an 8 can appear in this cell and this cell. And this cell matches with the positions an 8 could go in column 5. And if we look now at column 8 instead, we see this cell and this cell. These are the only positions an 8 can go in column 8. And this cell here is matching with this row of the empty rectangle. So there's a few different things to think about, but let's now think about the logic of what this means. Well, one option would be that the 8 is found along this side of the empty rectangle, i.e. in row 4. What would that mean? Well, it would mean that this could not be an 8. This would be forced to be an 8. And this could not be an 8 here. So in this situation, we'd be able to eliminate this 8 and eliminate this 8. Powerful stuff, you can immediately see, because it would give us a number. It gives us this 1 and this 9. Well, what if that's not true? What if instead the other option for the empty rectangle is true, i.e. the 8 actually is appearing in column 5 this time? Well, you can immediately see we'd be able to eliminate the 8 here again. This would be forced to be an 8, therefore this couldn't be an 8 either. So we end up with the same thing either way round. We eliminate the 8 here and the 8 here, and we get the 1 and the 9 pair that's so powerful to completing the solve. So that would be another way of getting to, a very quick solution from this point. And the final thing to note, which I also saw, was we can actually find a finned X-Wing as well on 8s. Again, let's look now at column 5 and column 8 and ask ourselves where 8s can go in the columns this time. Here you can see, hopefully I'll highlight it, this cell, and this cell, and then over in this cell, this cell can take the 8 and this cell. So the sort of, if this cell didn't exist, we'd have a straightforward X-Wing on 8s, and we could eliminate the 8 here. But this cell does exist, and this is the so-called fin of the X-Wing. We have to ask ourselves what that means. Well, again, it's just, all you have to understand is how to frame the question. So there's two possibilities. Either this is an 8. Now, if this is an 8, we can eliminate this 8 here, and that's great. If this is not an 8, then we have an X-Wing, because we have this cell this cell, and this cell, forming an X-wing pattern, and therefore we know that the 8 will either be here and here, or here and here, and therefore we can eliminate every other 8 that we find along the relevant rows there. So we would be able to eliminate this 8 in that situation. So again, that gives us the 9 here, and because that then interacts down here on all these cells, everything collapses immediately again. So 3 different ways of getting to the right answer. Which is the easiest to spot? I'd say probably actually the one with the most complicated name, the Sashimi Finned X-Wing, because some people talk about, this is also called a skyscraper pattern, and you know, for that I think it does sort of jump out at you a bit, especially if you're at this late stage of the solve and you've probably got to the point of writing in all of the pairs of numbers, i.e. all of the cells that can only contain exactly 2 numbers, and you can see that the relevant cells would all therefore be highlighted, and you could very easily deduce the logic if you were aware of what to look for. With the Finned X-Wing, you know, you have to be concentrating on this square too, which is a 189, and similarly with the empty rectangle, you'd also have to be thinking about, you know, a cell that had 3 possibilities in it. So perhaps the skyscraper is the easiest alternative. But yeah, something a bit different today. I thought it would be interesting to show that, you know, you don't have to just know, you don't have to know all of the complicated techniques to solve these puzzles. Just one would be enough. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the content, please do subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. We'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.